So this is an effect that I saw in a movie advertisement just recently, and it's a pretty neat effect where they take an image and apply it to a background like this, really old-fashioned background, and give it kind of an illustrated quality where it has a kind of a worn-out, old-fashioned look to it. You can see it, I've seen it on movie posters for westerns and stuff like that, and it's a pretty cool effect. So the first thing I need to do is on this image here is remove all the color information. So I'm going to go under Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. And the next thing I'm going to do is go under Filter to Blur to Surface Blur. And the reason I'm using Surface Blur is that I want it to really smooth out all the little fine detail in her skin and everything in here. But I don't want it to lose any of the detail in the hat and any of the other highly defined areas like the teeth and the mouth and her eyes and everything like that. Now if I ran a regular blur filter or a Gaussian blur, it would certainly lose the detail altogether, and I don't want it to do that. And the reason why I want to smooth this out is because of the next filter I'm going to run. So I'm just going to hit OK here. And I'm actually going to duplicate this layer because I'm going to be using this blurred layer by itself as part of the effect later on. So on this duplicate layer, go under Filter again, and we're going to go to Artistic, Poster Edges. And we're going to get this big window here. And you can see right away I'm getting a kind of a dark outline effect here, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And you can see right here in her face where that smooth blurred area is. If I had left that texture on her skin the way it was, we would have been getting all this grittiness all over her face. And by blurring that image, we were able to avoid that. And I can see that a lot of the line detail is pretty much as I want it. If I wanted to, tweak that a little bit, I could certainly adjust these settings over here. And that looks pretty good. So let's go hit OK. So now I have this layer with the bold outlines, and I have this blurred layer just as it was originally. So now you can see that this background layer is locked because it's a background layer. So I'm just going to double click on it to make it its own layer, because we're going to be dragging these two layers over to this textured background I have right here. So with this image active, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select both layers. And I'm just going to click on that layer and drag them right over to this new document. And I'm just going to minimize this file here because I don't need that right now. And I'm going to just zoom out here a little bit. And I'm going to bring up my free transform with both of these layers still active. I'm going to bring my free transform, Command or Control T, and just see where I'm at in the scale of things here. And actually it looks pretty good. I'm just going to reposition this just a little bit this way so that arm is just a little bit more visible. And we'll hit enter. I'm going to turn off this layer here because I want to work on this layer in the middle just for a minute. And on this layer I'm going to change this layer's blending mode to color burn. And I'm going to drop its opacity down to about 60%. And let's maybe like 65. And I'm going to bring up a layer mask onto this layer. So I'm just going to click on this new layer mask icon here. And I'm going to go over here and get my gradient tool. And I want to make sure that I'm going from black to transparent right here. And what I'm going to do is bring in a fade basically from around all the sides, just so it's not so crisp right up to the edge. I want it to have kind of a worn out effect, and almost as if it's fading from years of wear and tear. So I'm just going to start at the top here, hold down my Shift key, and just drag a gradient in on that layer mask. And that's just basically making it a little transparent. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to activate that other layer. And this layer I'm going to make its blending mode soft light. And like the one before, I'm going to drop its opacity down, but this time about 75%. And again, I'm going to add a layer mask and just going to fade in those edges just like we did on that last layer. Just a little bit here. Not quite as much as the last one, but just a little bit here and there. Okay. Now, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select both of these layers once again. And I'm going to go into my Layers pull-down menu here and select New Group from Layers. And we'll just give us a name. And what that's done is taken both of those layers and dropped them into a folder here in my Layers palette, making them a layer group. Now it's going to be important in a second, but for now I'm going to turn off this group because I want to work on this texture. I'm actually going to make a duplicate of this texture layer. And as we did before, I'm going to remove the color information. Go to Adjustments, desaturate. And I'm going to bring up my levels. Zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to bring up my levels using Command or Control L. And I'm going to push the contrast on this layer way up there so we can really see that texture. I really want to define that texture a lot. Right about like that. That's just by pushing those sliders in there. We'll hit OK. Now I want to activate this layer as a selection, but I only want it to activate the light areas, the luminosity of this layer. And the way to do that is to hold down my Alt, Control, or Option Command and press the tilde key, which is the little wavy line key next to the number 1 on your keyboard. And what that does is activates the luminosity of that layer as a selection. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw this layer away because I'm not needing it anymore. I'm going to turn on this grouped layer here that we have, the layer group, and with the group active, I'm going to click on my layer mask icon, and it's going to generate a layer mask based on that selection. And it's going to affect every layer in this group. If I zoom in here, you can see how that texture is affecting the overall image. And it's really affecting these two images here. So if I turn one of these off, it's still affecting them because they're part of that group. Their original layer masks are here and still intact. And this new one that I just created, if I hold down my Alt or Option and click on it, there it is right there. And it's affecting that entire layer group as a whole. And that pretty much completes the effect. You can see we're getting a really worn out, old-fashioned wear and tear look here, all from using that one photograph. And if you wanted to take this technique way further and do a complete design on it, I've actually got a finished one here that I did. So let me bring it up here. And you can see right here, I've taken several images and composited them together using that very same technique. And even on the text here, you can see I use that same thing I did over here where I applied the texture as a layer mask. I did that same thing right here on this text to give it a much more old-fashioned look. So you can take the technique and do a whole lot of really creative stuff with it. So I encourage you to give it a try and have fun with it, and we'll see you next time.